Recovery presents Facing Addiction Podcast.
We have a whole generation that we've lost to fentanyl. Just last year, 100,000 people.
You know, even though I didn't want to believe that it was happening or
to respond in healthier ways so that we could give them the best chance that we could.
Hey guys, welcome to the Facing Addiction Podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Tisdale, the founder and CEO of Pinnacle Peak Recovery. I have a very special guest today. His name is Mike Kibler, and this is the man who saved my life and 12-stepped me out of jail. So Mike's going to tell his story of addiction and recovery and then maybe how that intersected. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Tyler. It's good to be here, buddy. It's good to see you.
Yeah, you too, man. Yeah, if you don't mind just telling the listeners a little bit about your experience, strength, and hope.
Sure. My name is Mike Kibler. My sobriety date's February 14th, 2008, and I'm extremely grateful, and so is my family because of that, and that's it, man. I just celebrated 15 years.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see. We're doing a little bit of a retake. I had some pretty strong coffee this morning, and we're retaking this because we spent about 20 minutes talking about sixth grade. So, anyways, man, I'm grateful, Tyler, to be a part of your life, man, and a part of this journey with you. I've known you a long time.
Yeah.
So that's part of the reason why Tyler called me out here today, because we definitely have a history with each other, and so I'm glad we get to tell that story today.
Yeah. Every time I drive on the 10, I think it is, coming from Phoenix to the East Valley, you know, the 10 right where the Phoenix College building is. Mm-hmm. They took that sign down, but every time I drive on that freeway, which is quite often, I always get a flashback of driving in your Mustang on the way out of jail when we were on the way to your house in Tempe and passing that building by. And that was the first time I've ever seen that building. And so for whatever reason, it triggers that memory.
Right on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's cool, man. I got to celebrate Tyler's participate in your wedding, you know, a little while back, and that was awesome to finally get to meet your mom too. And she said such kind things. It was awesome.
Yeah.
I really am proud of you, dude. I love you.
I love you too.
All right, so let's see. I'm a native to Arizona. I was born and raised here. You know, I have a super loving mom. Her name's Patty. She's at home watching Lifetime right now, I assure you, thinking about what she can do to, pack into the stream of life. I'm an alcoholic, and I'm a drug addict. And I have a super grateful life today. You know, I should be able to. I have, I'm a father today. I get to coach, baseball, and I have grandkids today. You know, I have a 5-year-old grandson and a 2-year-old grandson and a 13-year-old son that's never seen me drink or use. And I have a lot, man. I have a girlfriend that I'm madly in love with. Sobriety has been an awesome journey. I should be able to turn, and I can't take credit for any of this stuff. I should be able to turn everything over in my life today. On the back of it, it should say property of Alcoholics Anonymous. And, it's progressive for me. You know, I started off as a young man, and my mom said I was the sweetest little boy ever. And then when I started to interact, I remember going to school, and I started to interact with the other kids, and, I don't know, it just, I know today I was restless, irritable, and discontent, but I didn't know that then, right? I was just, I was hyperactive and had attention deficit disorder, and I'm getting old. They didn't really know what that was back then. I was just a class clown, and I struggled to do any sort of homework. My mom certainly did her best to try to help out, and as I got older, when I got into the 6th grade was the first time I ever put something into my system, and it was from, I mixed some passport scotch and some other things together, and I started to drink with my cousin, and I'll never forget that feeling that I had. It was that noise in my head started to shut off, and I remember thinking I want to do this as much and as often as I can. Even though I got sick that same day, I was doing it again the next weekend. And in about the 7th grade, my mom, I had a principal that told my mom, she said, I hear you have a son coming up through the ranks. I can't wait to meet him. And my mom's like, well, I'm sure you will. And that's the case. I got in all kinds of trouble in school. And the addiction just progressed. You know, I remember thinking when I was little, I remember seeing those commercials like, this is your brain on drugs, right? I want to be a firefighter. I knew I was smart, even though I had straight Fs. I knew that I was intelligent. I was street savvy. And I remember talking to my mom saying, Mom, one day I'm going to knock it off. Everything's going to be okay, Mom. It's not your fault. She'd lay in bed awake every night and wonder what she was doing wrong. And Mama tried everything. I wanted to get a tattoo that said Mama tried. And I can tell you today when I crossed over that imaginary line into full-blown addiction, but I really had a hard time drawing a sober breath, you know, from the age of, 12 years old and until I got sober. You know, I had some bouts of sobriety in between, and I'll talk about that a little bit. But, I remember when I got into this disease progressed for me. Those yets that I swore I would never do, putting things in up my nose and powders or needles into my arm, I knew I was never going to do that. But alcohol, for whatever reason, it just lowers those inhibitions. Everything seems like a real good idea. And one time I tried the amphetamines and I thought, I'm in big trouble. I'm in big trouble because all of a sudden that attention deficit disorder, that it wasn't there anymore. I was able to put puzzles together, have intelligent conversations, but I knew I was in big trouble, right? That became my drug of choice. And, after doing it for so long, I had a hard time seeing the good in myself, the good in others. You know, it really did eventually turn me into, a bit of a monster, right? So I had the same girlfriend in junior high, and she was a sweetheart. You know, her name was Jamie. It's my daughter's mom, and she was a good girl, and she was pretty loyal. You know, I was in and out of jail on a regular basis. You know, I was incarcerated as a young man. I went to Seth facility. That? It's a junior high. It's for
juvenile hall.
Yeah, okay. In Mesa. It's called Seth. I went there several times, and I've spent several years of my life in and out of jail, right? So, in fact, that's how we started our journey, right? So, I went to my very first treatment center. I knew I needed to get sober. I sort of wanted to get sober, but I went to my very first treatment center. It was in Chandler. It was called Sunburst. What happened was my dad died when I was 10, and I got an inheritance. I think it was like $65,000, and I blew through that in about 6 months. And by the 7th month, they put a padlock on my apartment because I was broke with no place to go. And I remember during that time, I called my daughter's mom. She finally broke up with me. And I called her the next day, and she said, Michael, I'm pregnant. And I looked up at the sky, and I remember seeing it was pink. And I'm like, we're going to have a little girl. And she's crying. She's like, Michael, you got to get sober. You're not going to be a part of this little girl's life. And so I said, I will get sober as soon as I get back from Rocky Point. And I got deported from Rocky Point.
You got deported?
I got deported. My mom had to pay $3,800. I had to talk to the American Embassy on a regular basis. They smoked my marijuana. The Commandante smoked my marijuana and told me it was good marijuana, but I didn't have a title to my truck. I didn't bring it down there. In fact, my friend's like, Michael, please, we're young men. You got an awesome truck. Let's leave the meth at home. He's like, we can get some cocaine when we get down there, and so that happened. And anyways, we had to get the original title, come back down there. We had to tell the judge that I was a drug addict. And anyways, I got out of there. And but while I was in there, I called my kid's mom, and her mom answered, and she said, I told you, you got to leave this guy alone. When I got back, I went off to the races, and I remember calling my kid's mom, and she wouldn't answer. And I talked to my mom, and I checked myself into this treatment center called Sunburst. That's when I drew my first breath, sober breath in a long time. And that's when I realized that I had crossed over that imaginary line of full-blown addiction because my skin was crawling. I was restless. I was irritable. I was discontent. I couldn't appreciate, the sunset or the sunrise. I just had some sort of God-sized hole, and I knew I needed to fill it. And I remember telling the counselor, this place isn't for me. They said, Michael, it's family day. Can you wait? Don't leave 5 minutes before that miracle happens. Can you wait? Your mom's coming, and your kid's mom's coming. Can you wait? And I said yes. And during that counseling group, I remember looking at my mom's face and she was full of hope, and she was so proud of me. And I remember looking over at my daughter's mom, and they talk about women looking beautiful when they're pregnant, and she had this glow about her. And I got scared, and as soon as they left, I was off to the races again. I called my mom, and my daughter's mom had been in labor for 24 hours, and I went down to the hospital, and I walked into the hallway, and I'd been up for days, and her family was looking at me like they always look at me, and I got a great relationship with them now, by the way. But I walked in, and I wasn't a part of any of the Lamaze classes, and they told me to hold her leg, and I looked down, and they talk about childbirth being beautiful and natural. Well, I looked down and I saw the head crown, and she didn't like the expression on my face, so she said, "Get out," and I said, "No problem," and I stepped on a balloon and it popped, and I was so out of my mind. I thought maybe there was gunshots or something, and I proceeded to fall asleep in the hallway, and my mom's trying to wake me up because I'd been up for days. When I finally did come to, they said, "Michael, your daughter's here. Would you like to go in and hold her?" And I'll tell you what, Tyler, I went to church when I was little, and I really wasn't having it at that point in my life. But when I held my daughter in my arms for the first time, I said my very first prayer. I said, "God, I don't want to live like this anymore. I want to take care of this little girl." And I meant it with every fiber of my being. That unconditional love that I had for my daughter was prevalent in my life, and I did. I just felt so helpless. I wanted help. I wanted to take care of that little girl, man. I did. And since then, I've been in the deadbeat dad roundup for failure to pay child support. I never stopped trying. I've been to every sober living house in Mesa, Arizona. I went to treatment centers like you wouldn't believe, but I struggled with the whole God concept, right? In my mind, I thought I needed a pack of cigarettes and a job, and I knew the car was out of the question because I owed $10,000 to get one of those things back. I want to talk about a little bit of a solution. That little girl, I couldn't stay sober for. I couldn't stay sober for my mom. I knew, right? So the first time I went to jail, Tyler, when I knew I should have taken a left instead of a right? I need to leave the hard stuff alone. Second time I went to jail, on the way out, they said, "We'll see you again real soon." I thought, what are you talking about? I'm not coming back to this place. A decade later, Tyler, I knew exactly what they meant, right? I'm coming back. The shoe's going to drop. I had a hard time showing up to court, and my life progressed. And those things, I'll tell you, I'm not proud to say, but there's somebody out there that can probably identify. When I couldn't look at myself in the mirror, and I didn't care about myself. I didn't care about anyone else. When I was in my addiction, I did a lot of smash and grabs. I broke into a lot of cars in broad daylight, broke in a lot of car windows. I burglarized a lot of houses. I'm not proud to say that. But in the same aspect, I'm certainly grateful to be on this side of that first step. Mm-hmm. It took me to have those struggles to be where I'm at today, right? So I in and out of jail, in and out of homelessness for a long time. I was homeless for probably 10 years of my life. I slept in my mom's backyard. She never quite called the cops on me, but she didn't leave a pillow or a blanket for me either. Right? So this last time, I got in trouble, right? They called me, the Channel 10 News called me the Hamburglar. I broke into one of the chief of police's cars, and I dropped a cheeseburger wrapper in the car, and then I went to the neighbors and did the same thing, and my arms were so full of stuff that I dropped that cheeseburger wrapper, and so they said the Hamburglar strikes again, right? Even Chief such and such isn't safe in his own neighborhood. And so I called my mom, and I said, "Hey, Mom, apparently my car's been involved in all kinds of armed robberies, home invasions, and burglaries. The police have it. I need to get some sort of help, right? I think I might need to get an attorney." And so she happened to know one. I ended up giving a kidney to this guy, not because he helped me get out of trouble or anything, but he needed one. And when I got sober, it was one of my first amends I got to make was donating this kidney to Roger.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Anyways, I made my start. I got up to Prescott, Arizona, and I had a friend of mine that I thought everything was funny, man. I had I had detectives wanting me to take possession of this vehicle and pretending to be tow truck companies. And my sponsor, Farron, at the time was telling him, "Michael, you got to stop talking to those detectives, right? They're wanting me to take possession." And anyways, Farron worked something out with my mom and sent me off to this treatment center that supposedly specializes in attention deficit disorder, and that's where I got to make my journey, was in North Hollywood. and got to meet some really cool people. And I haven't found it necessary to drink any whiskey or shoot any dope since that time. And I got busy. I got busy in Alcoholics Anonymous. So when I went to that treatment center, I was there about 3 months. My mom spent an extra year of her life to pay for that treatment center because it was not out of pocket. They weren't accepting insurance or anything like that. That's where I made my journey. When I got back out here, I got indicted over the Hamburglar stuff. I knew I was getting ready to go to prison. I was in a sober living house. Believe it or not, they have a ghetto in South Scottsdale. And I was in a sober living house, and there was like 14 of us and with one bathroom. And I was smoking up everybody's cigarettes. I was, again, in sobriety at this time, 4 months sober. I was restless, irritable, and discontent. I didn't get to feel the presence of God working in my life at the time. I knew I was getting ready to go to prison. My mom, she said, Michael, they found Al-Anon. And she said, there's people out there that can help you. I did my part. You got to find your own way, son. And today I'm super grateful for Al-Anon and that my mom found that program. But I was walking around one day, and the owner of the sober living said, hey, Michael, umpteen amount of dollars. You don't have a job. You're eating up everybody's food. You're smoking up everybody's cigarettes. It's probably time for you to go. I went to a meeting that day, and there was a guy that said, at the meeting, I shared something. He said, do you have a sponsor? I said, nope. And he's like, you do now. And I'm like, nope. And I went back to the sober living house, and he said, hey, Michael, it's time for you to pack up your things. I didn't want to drink as bad as I wanted to drink, and I had about $3 in my pocket. And nobody really wanted to pick up any of my phone calls at this point at 4 months sober. And the phone rang. And I remember he said, I hope that's your ride. And it angered me. Well, when I called, it was this guy. And he said, hey, I knew you were staying over at the sober living house. I really think that we can help each other. And he said, who is that? And I said, it's my sponsor. And that's all he wanted to hear. He wanted to see me get well. He came and we started my journey. I got out and he came and picked me up. And I remember he had cigarettes and I was out. So I was like, yeah, come on, sponsor man, right? And I got in the car with him, and he was talking about hopping fences and his dad dying of a heroin overdose and going into mental institutions. And I can relate for the first time with another man because my ears, I was open to hearing his message, right? And so I told him I got no problems with the first step, sponsor man. I called him sponsor man. I said, I get it. I'm powerless over alcohol, and my life's obviously unmanageable. I'm 4 months sober, right? And then I said, but what I have a problem with is the second step, right? So with this God thing. And he showed me in the book where it says, do you now believe, or are you even willing to believe? If you can answer yes, then we emphatically assure you that you're well on your way. Well, I could get on board with that. I knew if there wasn't a God, I was in big trouble, right? Because I knew that, whatever, I've been doing this for a long time. And he says, it's real simple. Are you willing to get down on your knees and say the third step prayer with me? And I said, I am. I got no qualms with that. And I got down on the halfway house and I said the third step prayer with this man. The next day, I was at the sober living house, and I had rolled up all the tobacco out of the cigarette butts in the backyard. And I didn't have anything to eat or anything like that. And I was thinking about God's will for me, and I didn't know. So I called him. I said, hey, sponsor man, I have no clue what God's will is for me. He says, I do, Michael, and I'll be there at 6 o'clock to pick you up. I'm like, well, cool, bring some of them smokes, And so I get in the car with him, and he says, Michael, God wants you to do your 4-step. That's God's will for you. And he started giggling. And it gave me all kinds of anxiety. Remember, I did homework one time in 6th grade so I could go to water fun day because I wanted to see Corrine D in her bathing suit, right? I could barely read and I could barely write, so I expressed this with him. And he's belly laughing, and he says, that doesn't surprise me a bit, And I didn't know whether to laugh or be offended. But he says, Michael, look, man, if you can't read, I'll read with you. I'll read to you. When your hand gets tired of writing, I'll pick up the pen. He had a beautiful wife and a son at home, and he was a pilot. And his primary purpose was to carry the message to me. He was my Ebby, right? He was the one that gave me hope. He loved me when I didn't love myself. My family wanted nothing to do with me. My daughter was 12 years old. I couldn't see her. I owed $60,000 in child support. So I started my journey. He got me involved in Alcoholics Anonymous. I got involved in a men's meeting. I started to make my way. I started to write out this 4-step. I started to see my part in all this in my resentments. I started to see my part, period. I wrote out a sex inventory, and I started to make my journey, man. I started getting involved in H&I right away. my life started to progress, right? 1 month turned into 6 months, I started getting invited over to my mom's house for dinner. My sponsor would say things like, Michael, don't ask her for any money. Tell her how, you can tell her how good you're doing. I don't want you to complain to your mom. I want you to ask her how she's doing. So I'd call him up and I'd say, hey, sponsor man, it went well. He's like, cool, what'd you do after dinner? I'm like, I went home and I didn't ask for any money. He's like, nah, man, you got to get in there and do the dishes. Right? So these guys taught me how to be a father, taught me how to be a son, taught me how to be a worker among worker. I did get indicted. I ended up doing 4 months in jail when I was sober quite a bit, but I went in sober. I got to come out sober. 1 month turned into 6 months, turned into visitations with my daughter. Remember, my first child support payment was $38. I'm thinking, I'm not sending him $38. I owe over $60,000 in child support. He says, when God makes it possible for you to send more, we're going to send more. And I can tell you today, I got to walk my daughter down the aisle. I remember calling her because she has a really loving stepfather and family, and her mom's great, and he loved her like his own. And I remember when my daughter told me she was getting married, all these, selfish fears I had of not being able to walk my daughter down the aisle, because at best I was a sick friend, right? I remember calling her and telling her, hey, listen, I love you, and I'm just grateful that I get to be a part of this journey with you. And I'm just grateful to be at the wedding, Ryan deserves it, and I want him to be able to walk you down the aisle. And she started crying, and she says, Dad, there's room for both of you. And today I'm a grandfather. I've been sober a long time, I guess, right? So got a 5-year-old grandson. His name's Steele. I got a 2-year-old grandson named Stetson. Little cutie pies, man. I've got a 13-year-old son that's never seen me drink or use. I get to coach baseball. Alcoholics Anonymous has saved my life. My kids don't question whether I love them or not because I'm active and I'm involved in their lives today. There's no way in God's green earth, right, that the Hamburglar gets to get a badge to go into the county jails. And I get to make my journey, man. And if it wasn't for that opportunity, if it wasn't for being on this side of that first step, me and you wouldn't be having this conversation.
Yeah, no. And so talk about H&I. Like, what is H&I and how has that played a pivotal role in your recovery?
You got it. So when I first got sober, I remember they were asking me to go to, all I knew how to talk about was fist fighting, breaking into car windows, right? Nothing of the spiritual principle malady. I'm brand new sober. And they talked to me about the importance of just getting in the car and going. So I would show up to these events, and on the way I'd say, I have no idea what to tell these people. And they're like, sure you do. You know absolutely what it's like, that first step, being powerless and your life unmanageable. So why don't you just talk about that, right? And I started to make my journey with these guys. By doing H&I, if I just went to meetings, I don't really get to know these guys, but when I'm actually doing H&I and I'm involved, these guys become my family. I get to go down the road with these guys and build these relationships because it's super important that you have you should have five people that get to know you on that sort of basis. And H&I was pivotal in that. I remember my mom has this tablecloth at home, and for whatever reason, I'm only on there about every 3 years because I'm incarcerated. Right?
Like signatures?
Yes. She would have this tablecloth and they would draw little pictures and they would put the dates on there. And on my mom's tablecloth, I'm absent, right? I know what it's like not to show up with Christmas presents because I'm behind bars. And when I'm, I spent a lot of my life behind bars. And so when I did the application, you can have felonies on your record to have a badge to go into the county jails. Trust me, I have a few of them. And I got that badge to go into the county jails, and that's where I get to see. I like going into the detoxes. They're fresh, but a lot of the times all they get to hear is womp, 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 right? Because, but when I'm in the jails, I get to see broken men that miss their kids, that don't want to live like this anymore. I remember sitting in there, right, around Christmas time and Thanksgiving, wanting to be around my family. So when I get to go into the county jails, especially with my story, I get to share with these men, right? I get to carry some sort of message to hope to them. Like I know what that's like to miss the families. I know what it's like to make a mess of your life and want to change. But I also know what it's like to where as soon as we hit that door, we're off to the races, right? We make all of these resolutions while we're in there not to drink and use anymore. But as soon as we hit the door, we're off to the races again, and it's that vicious cycle.
And H&I stands for hospitals and institutions, and it's where we take meetings into places where people can't necessarily get out to carry the message of Alcoholics Anonymous or whatever 12-step program it might be. And you don't get paid to do it. You're just there it's really to help people, and which in returns helps us. And that's how Mike and I met. So maybe tell the story of coming into Durango, like from what you recall.
I can't think of another place to where I get to feel as close to my creator as when I'm in Durango jail, when I'm talking to other inmates, and it's euphoric. When I walk into that building, everyone thinks I'm like a bounty hunter or something. I walk in through the front,
You
street
look like
clothes.
a bounty hunter.
Thank you, sir. And they're looking at me, and as soon as I get there, I say, God, just put me where you want me. Yeah. Right. And I've had several people that I'm going down the road in sobriety today that I got to see behind bars bringing a 12-step meeting in.
Not just me?
No.
Oh, wow.
Yep. So,
awesome.
in fact, I've got a great story after this I could talk to you about the Hamburglar. I was on a panel with a guy that was telling me his story, and he said it's all started by this crazy guy coming in talking about the Hamburglar story. He had no idea I was sitting to Rusty Cube. Had no idea that I was sitting, there was Jimmy and then me on the other side.
Wow.
So after the meeting, he's like, Rusty, meet the Hamburglar. Right? And this
Oh
is
my
years.
gosh.
So he'd been sober for years, and we were
That's
down the
awesome.
Salvation Army on the panel.
That's awesome.
So, and today Rusty he calls me his Ebby.
That's cool,
Right?
man.
So
You were saying you were walking in?
day I met you.
Yeah. So what do you remember from that?
Yeah, well, the first thing I always do is say, God, where do you want me? And he put me exactly where he did, right? So I walked into this meeting. There was about 6 of you sitting in there. Mm-hmm. And we were sitting, I believe it was D6.
Yeah.
Okay. D6. Been there.
Yeah.
So I'm sure I spent some Christmases and Thanksgivings in D6.
Yeah.
In fact, I've been to most of the pods in D6. So I show up and I give my normal pitch, and there was a young man that I could tell, man, when I'm giving my pitch, I try to interact and read body language, and I could tell Tyler over here was a youngster. How many years ago was that?
10.
10 years ago.
10 and a half, yeah. Yeah.
And I was looking up, and I could tell Tyler was engaged, and after the meeting, he came up to me and a broken young man, scared, full of fear, and he said, I really like what you had to say today. When are you coming back? And truly, I don't have a set schedule. I go in there and I say a prayer, and God leads me to where I need to be for the day, and I always get to see that. And I knew right then and there that I needed to make this a regular thing with Tyler. And so that's where we started our journey. I told him when I was going to be there and what day, and I showed up. I made it just like my sponsor did for me, man. He made me his primary purpose was to get me through the book. I know there was something with Tyler that I wanted to come back and get to know this guy.
But I remember they called the meeting, and I went out there, and it was just like, Mike, I've tried this before. And I don't know if this was the first time we met, the second or the third, but it's like, I've tried this before and it hasn't worked, but like I was just broken and you gave me a lot of hope. And it's like, hey, you weren't really doing AA before. You were just kind of going to meetings. Like, this may be what you were missing. And it like put a lot of hope in me. And then you were coming back when you said you'd come back, and man, I spent Thanksgiving in there, and that was the only good meal I had in Durango. Other than that, it was just like, they give you moldy bread in the morning for, nasty turkey meat or ham.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so gross. No lunch, just like that for breakfast. You're supposed to ration that for the entire day. And then this nasty slop that has like maggots in it. I don't know if they still do that. I think they got in trouble because it was just like so nasty.
They shut down Durango.
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
my God.
They shut it down, condemned the building.
The building's condemned?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and then you picked me up from jail on December 12th, 2012, and my journey started there. I don't know if you remember the conversations we had at your house, but you took me to your house, and the plan was for me just to go right back to the Bay Area, and I didn't have anything. And looking back, like my life just started on that corner of, what was the corner of Mill and
Broadway.
Mill and Broadway. And you told me like, hey, where's your own ideas gotten you in the past? And it's like, no, we're good. Mike. You're like, why don't you try something new? And that night you took me to sober living in the ghetto of South Scottsdale. It wasn't that ghetto, but you remember that sober living? What was that called?
I can't remember.
It was right next to the men's group. We used to Dog Tire.
Yeah.
Got me hooked up into a men's group. I started doing auto glass at the car wash with you. You seem like a rock star in the jail. You're like, yeah, I got a badass Mustang. I got my own auto glass company. Dude, and I was like, oh my God. Like, this guy is fucking sick.
Yeah. Mustang Mike.
Yeah, dude. And you picked me up in that Mustang.
Had a little sag.
Did it?
In the back end, yeah.
Yeah, and your kid was probably like 3 or 4 years old back then. How old is he now?
13.
Yeah, so he was 3 years old.
Yeah.
Man, yeah. It was a long time ago, but it doesn't feel that long ago.
It's been an awesome journey, man, to see you develop and grow and hook in. You know, you were willing and were able to take some suggestions, right? You got involved in a men's group right away and started your journey with H&I, and apparently you're still making that a pivotal part of your sobriety, and I'm proud of you.
Thanks, man. Yeah, like right away, you guys dragged me along to Valley Hospital every Friday night. We'd go in there, and you guys told me the same thing that the guys told you. It's like, you know, you don't have to know everything. Just go in there and share for like a few minutes, and then that few minutes turned into 5, turned into 10, you know, and I was actually like contributing on the panel after not too long. And every Friday that I'd walk out of there, I felt a little better and a little better. Yeah. And I mean, the things you guys showed me early on laid the foundation for long-term recovery for sure.
Yeah, no, I'm just, I love you, buddy. This has been, it's awesome to watch the light turn on in people. I remember, like, a lot of you probably don't know, and now that Tyler has a professional career, he's actually a pretty awesome rapper.
Yeah.
And so, like, if you wanted to do something like right now, since I have the microphone and we have a studio, if you could just do a quick... No. Like, come on, buddy. You're really good at it. I'll start us off. Ready?
No.
Come on.
Bro. So, yeah.
He's not doing it.
So I was rapping in early recovery, and it was cool because it was about recovery, and I did like a rap battle at a convention. And, it was a fun time in my life. How old were you back then?
Well, let's see. I got
30.
So you're 10 years sober? Mm-hmm. So I was 34.
Mm. And Mike and I went back in the jails together. I got my badge, and we were able to go back into Durango jail, D6, and talk to the guys.
That's right. We did.
Yeah. And it's cool. It was cool because you could literally go in anytime. You didn't have to be scheduled. Mike and I and Mike before me, you know, you just walk right in, show your badge to the front gate, and they just buzz you in, and you're free to roam throughout the whole jail. Yeah. And it was just like, it was crazy, like having those flashbacks. And COVID shut it down, and then I guess they shut down Durango totally.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. What a trip, man. It's not everybody gets to have that experience, right?
No. So what are some struggles that you've had in recovery, and how have you overcame them?
Struggles in recovery, you know, a lot of it was just self-hatred towards myself, right? So when I was doing a 4-step, I was saying earlier that I was able to see my part in situations. I've always been able to see my part in forgiveness, forgiving myself. That's been the hardest thing. Because I've hurt all the ones that I've loved. You know, I was in and out of my daughter's life and my family's life, and my sisters were super resentful because, of what it did to my mom. I caused a lot of harm when I was in my addiction. And so the self-forgiveness. And today I realized that, you know, the biggest thing I got out of Alcoholics Anonymous is I found the magic in this whole deal. And when I'm thinking of others more than I'm thinking of myself, that's what fills that God-sized hole. So staying active, staying engaged, that's how I overcome those struggles, right? Is when all else fails, nothing insures us, right? For like intense work with another alcoholic. So I've maintained taking knuckleheads through the steps, and that's been a lot of help. And doing the next right thing, right? Showing up, suiting up, and showing up.
So what do you say to someone who's in active addiction or struggling, and maybe doesn't know what to do, doesn't even know they're struggling? Like, what's your suggestion?
I think the biggest thing is there's all kinds of resources out there for you. If you're struggling with alcohol, there's medical detoxes. Typically it's, you're at high risk for seizure if you're drinking. If it's not the 24 hours, it's the 48 hours. If you quit drinking and you're shaking and you're feeling that anxiety, you need to reach out and get some help. There's detox facilities out there that will take major insurance. There's detoxes out there that will take access. And then if you don't have those resources at all, there's resources like Community Bridges. There's one on the west side that will take them with no insurance. What is that?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there's all kinds of resources out there. And that's the first step, right? Is you need to get removed from the situation you're in right there. And if it's any other thing, there's people out there that can help. There's all kinds of treatment facilities. The Salvation Army will take you with no money. It's a 6-month program. I know that people are doing really well. I have a lot of friends that are sober out of the Salvation Army. It's a work program, but it's completely free.
Yeah, definitely. And what do you say to someone who might be in the Salvation Army or other treatment programs or just even in early recovery?
Man, you got to hook in, right? So it's just like jail or any other place. I made so many convictions on staying sober, but yet I couldn't. I needed to be around other people that were on the same path. So I think it's imperative to, it's comfortable is comfortable, and we're creatures of habit. So when we get out of here, I think we formulate some sort of plan. We listen to the suggestions from the people on the H&I panels, your therapists, your counselors, on what to do. Sober living is key, right? So structure is really important for young people these days. I think that in order to build a network of a support system, sober living is important, because if it's a structured sober living house, they have things like, you have to have a sponsor. You have to meet with your sponsor on a regular basis. You have to have service commitments at a lot of these sober living houses, which is vital, right? In early sobriety. You start following these suggestions. If you're a girl, if you're a young woman, I suggest that you find a women's meeting. If you're a young man, I think it's super important that you at least attend one men's meeting a week, right? So, and then just start following these suggestions. Get in and hook in.
Yeah, definitely. And sober living is also cool because it can be intimidating going to a meeting by yourself. Like for the first time, if I know nothing about 12-step meetings and I just show up by myself, definitely do that if you're considering it. But it can be intimidating. And the cool thing about sober living is you're able to go with people from your sober living.
Yeah.
And then kind of meet one person through one person, and it just like compounds, and over time you get to know people. And another thing I'd suggest to people in early recovery is it's uncomfortable introducing yourself to people, but put your hand out there and say, hey, I'm Tyler, I'm new, and meet people, put yourself out there and build that support network.
Yeah. And hook in with the ones that want to stay sober.
Yeah, because there'll be ones that do and ones that don't at the sober living.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're wanting to stay sober, and you have these unbreakable bonds, right, with these people that you're in sober living with. I still have a host of friends, that I started my when I started out in treatment in North Hollywood. I still have a unbreakable bond and relationship with those people, and same with sober living. So.
Yeah, definitely. So diving into your recovery, you've been sober 15 years, and it's a cliche, like it's not all rainbows and butterflies. We go through struggles. I've had tough times in my recovery. I'm just curious, like, what's the toughest thing that you had to walk through that comes to mind, and how'd you get through it?
Well, I have, there's been a few things, right? So family stuff has been tough. So those, it's those amends we make, those that are living amends that I do on a regular basis. Some of these relationships take time to build, right? And I would say that I married my best friend in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I knew as long as I stayed in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous, this was going to be one of those relationships that were going to last, and we were going to wipe each other's butts when we got old. And it didn't work out that way. And it wasn't what I wanted. You know, I got a divorce and when I was sober, and it was one of the hardest things I ever had to walk through. And today I have a really good relationship with her. You know, she's not my son's mom, but she gets to see him every Sunday. There's 3 of us that co-parent. And so she's active in his life still, and it's been an amazing thing to watch that relationship develop and change and grow. But I didn't understand it, right? So I'm walking through this, and those feelings sober of jealousy and insecurity and low self-esteem and loneliness, right? So when I'm walking through this, I actually was suggested to get some outside help, and I did, and I'm grateful for that. And you never know, man. God sometimes, I don't want to say God closed this chapter or door because I don't know, but I'm certainly grateful, right? Today I have the most amazing woman in my life, and we've been dating for about 10 months now. We met on an airplane. I didn't mean to. I wasn't on Tinder or Bumble or whatever other, dating websites. It was just one of the most beautiful girls I ever met in my life sat down next to me. I thought because she thought I was handsome, but apparently there was only one seat left on the plane type deal. And man, I've developed. She's so happy. She's not affected by this, but she lost her dad of a heroin overdose a little over a year ago. She didn't know that people got sober. So she's fascinated. She loves going to the open meetings when she can, and she loves meeting my friends, and she really likes you a lot, Tyler. We got to take her to Tyler's wedding. So you just never know, right? So what God has in store for you, and sometimes it's you don't get to see the forest through the trees, and you don't know why something has happened. But I can tell you today, I was just telling Tyler that my girlfriend wakes up happy. She goes to bed happy. She reads the same book twice because it was so awesome the first time. I'm truly grateful. I'm so blessed, Tyler. Sometimes I don't always see, right, what God's done for me, but it's not all the material things, but I sure do have an amazing life today.
Yeah, you do, for sure. And I can relate a lot with like getting out of our own way. When I get out of my way, beautiful things can happen. And sometimes coincidences happen that are too much of a coincidence to be a coincidence. Yeah. And when I'm trying to like force things to happen, I can kind of create some chaos. But also for me, I was trying to think when I asked you that, like, what's the hardest thing I've gone through, and I think I've gone through several, but I think the hardest thing was right in line with what you were talking about. It's like dealing with mental health struggles through my recovery. And some of it's to do with me not being engaged in my recovery, and some of it's just like the way my brain's wired, and some of it's from like childhood trauma. Yeah. But just looking at that and doing the work, it was the hardest thing I went through in the beginning when I was dealing with it, because I didn't really know I was dealing with it, and I was just white knuckling it every day, dealing with like just like really, really bad anxiety, and coming through the other side and being like, man, I don't have to live like that anymore. Just like the alcoholism and addiction, it's been like the coolest thing I've been through. And then through that process of going to therapy, my therapist encouraged me to kind of try to close that gap, because my dad left when I was 5. My parents got a divorce. He took off. He's an alcoholic. He developed alcohol-induced dementia at like 53 years old.
So young.
Yeah, he's 60, like 2 or 3 now. But he was 53 years old when he developed it, and I haven't had a relationship with him for a very long time. Haven't really seen him since I was 18. But going back and visiting him, and I went in September, so 6 months ago, with my brother, and it was really cool because we flew out to Portland. My brother and I drove to Salem. It was about an hour drive, and we got a chance to talk. And my brother's in recovery now.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, he's got like 6 years. He's got a different journey to recovery. Like, he doesn't really do AA, but he's sober, he's happy, has a great life, and I mean, he was bad as well. So we're talking, getting closer, bonding. We go see my dad. Can't really talk to him. Like, he thinks the pictures on his wall of my brother and I, or my family, are my mom and him and my brother and I, the 2 kids.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah. And that was tough, man, like in recovery. And the toughest thing about it was just thinking how not only was I robbed of a father to alcoholism, but also my dad, like the most heartbreaking thing to me is my dad can get the same chance that me and you got. Yeah. You know, it's like he could have, like, if only like the timing would be different and somehow I could provide the resources that I have today to him. Right. Like maybe he would have got that opportunity. It's just sad, man. Not everybody gets the same opportunity that we get.
No, they don't, Tyler. Yep, yeah, they truly don't. And because of that opportunity that was given to you, Tyler, and you're sitting here, you get to be that example and participate in your kids' lives, right?
Yeah.
As a sober, healthy father.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on, Mike.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.